I think there's a lot of confusion and frankly, disinformation. What I think you're seeing is another manifestation of the absence of any real strategic planning, thinking, preparation before execution. Uh, Everything is impulse driven. It's whatever Donald Trump wakes up and decides he wants to do. His cabinet scurries around and tries to respond to it. Now, in reality, what happened? I think that we thought we had an opportunity inside Iran to really disrupt the regime, even bring it down. This, of course, was based on the protests that are really a consequence of a terrible economic situation and the dramatic reduction in value of the rial, the Iranian currency. Now, a lot of us have wondered why Iran has not gone to BRICS and or to the Chinese or someone and said, "Look, lend me $1 billion," because they could do that easily. That would boost the economy and help the situation tremendously. But for some reason, they haven't done that. Now, I know there's Islamic law that essentially forbids usury. This is one of the reasons the banks in the Islamic world tend to be very solid as opposed to ours. I don't know if that's the justification for it, but the bottom line is that what you started with were very legitimate protests about the economic conditions in Iran. Those overlapped with a struggle, political struggle, between reformers and conservatives. This then was developed into a CIA, Mossad, MI6 operation with the introduction of thousands of these Starlight terminals, enormous quantities of money, which in that setting, of course, is going to buy a certain amount of support. And now we have all sorts of evidence that's being provided overseas as well as here at home for instructions given to people in the crowds to fire on the police and provoke the police to shoot back at them in the hopes that people would be killed. And this then would worsen the situation. Well, all of this unfolded and it failed. It failed for a whole variety of reasons. The failure began, I would argue, last week on Friday when the Iranians and the Turks cooperated to annihilate 400 Kurdish fighters who were trying to move from Syria into Iran. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Mossad or the CIA anticipated that, but I think that's a very important development. There's a growing appreciation in Turkey for the criticality of stability and unity in Iran. The two states, for different reasons, have been competitors and sometimes enemies over 1,000 years. But both are civilizational states. We need to understand that. Americans don't have any idea what that means. Iran is Persia. The Persian Empire has been with us for 2,500, 2,600 years. They have a unique civilization and culture. So do the Turks, for very similar reasons. The Turks came out of Central Asia. They're not Arabs. Anyway, the point is that both of these states are not going to help us or the Israelis destroy one or the other because they see their survival as civilizational states at risk. So what's happened is that the Starlight terminals were largely picked up, confiscated. The Chinese assisted technically helping to suppress and jam these things and the satellite connections. I think the Russians have helped in whatever way they could, but the point is, I think President Trump was told that this was a golden moment in time, which would allow him with very little effort to topple the government. That failed miserably. Secondly, once it became clear that failed, I can't prove this, but I suspect the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, probably told him, if we're going to do this, we're going to need more firepower because what we anticipated has not happened. In other words, the country is not imploding. Its armed forces are intact. Its integrated air and missile defenses are intact and so forth. And I think at that point, stories were spun out to explain why now suddenly the attack was off. And remember, President Trump tried to persuade people, well, they've stopped killing. And I told them I didn't want them to kill. Give us a break. There's no evidence that Trump gives a damn about who lives or dies in the Middle East, least of all Iran. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just nonsense. And I think they had a Pakistani diplomat insists in his discussions with the Iranians that they told him that they informed Trump that they were scaling back on the killing. Now, maybe that was true, but I don't think it's killing in the sense of what you saw in the riots. think it's really executions of fifth columnists, people that betrayed their country and sold out principally to Mossad, because you had, according to Mr. Pompeo, lots of Mossad agents out in the audience. Well, gosh, what a shock.
Right.
So I think they probably told, it could be that President Putin, because supposedly the Russians have had their hand in advising them, said, listen, scale back on these executions for the moment.
Yeah.
Even though we tolerate these kinds of executions in Saudi Arabia and any other places all the time, and Trump never expressed any concern about the loss of life in Gaza. So who knows? But I think the show is on. You have to look at the Lincoln carrier battle group. It's still on its way to the region. We may see a second show up. I wouldn't be surprised. So I think the war is definitely on the agenda. And I don't see any evidence that Mr. Netanyahu is relenting. This is his golden moment. Either he acts and gets the full support, unconditional support of the United States Armed Forces and wins his war in his mind, or he loses.
Yeah. There was an odd earthquake in Israel yesterday. I don't know if you heard about this, a very short, odd earthquake that people are reporting happened right at where Israel would potentially be keeping nuclear weapons, that perhaps they were doing a test. They'd also had reportedly said that there was going to be an earthquake drill at the very moment that that had actually happened. Like they could predict, they knew when this earthquake was coming, which we don't have that kind of technology at this point to know when earthquakes are coming unless you're causing the earthquake. So do you think that Israel is preparing to go nuclear against Iran?
Well, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that could have been an underground nuclear test in the vicinity of Dimona, which is the region you're talking about. But we don't know. And you're not going to get the truth out of the United States government, which is essentially in the grip of Mr. Netanyahu and his billionaire donors in the United States. So I don't think we're going to find out the truth on that subject. Just keep in mind from the very beginning, and I'm not the Lone Ranger, I've said this several times, there is always a danger that if things go south for the Israelis, that they will turn to a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
We estimate they have between 250 and 300 nuclear warheads potentially. I don't know how many launchers. Some of these are on submarines. They have several Dolphin-class submarines the Germans gifted to them that were modified to carry cruise missiles with nuclear warheads. They can also deliver these from missiles on the ground. They can deliver them from F-15s to F-35s. So they have that capacity. And, this is something that the Turks have addressed, actually, obliquely. Even Mr. Erdogan publicly said, we know what you have, and we're not afraid. Well, the reason he's not afraid is that for years, and we're going back 30 years, the Pakistanis have promised the Turks a nuclear weapon if they need it. That's always been available to the Turks. And obviously, what a catastrophe that would be for the Middle East if the Israelis were arrogant and stupid enough to use a nuclear weapon. Then I think we would see nuclear weapons spring up all over the place, and that would be the end of Israel. So I hope that's not going to happen. But I don't see any evidence. Maybe you do, Kim. I don't see any evidence that we have any real influence over Israel. I see a lot of evidence that Israel has huge influence over us.
Yeah. And I think they are crazy enough to use a nuke. I mean, I don't put that outside of the realm of possibility. Their behavior has shown that they don't value human life to the level that one would expect of a Western democracy that they claim to be. But Iran, reportedly, there's also a bunch of hypersonic missiles pointed at Israel right now from Iran. And what's Israel's defense? I mean, Israel's a tiny country. Iran's massive. They saw what happened to them this past summer, spring. So I would think that they would be gearing up with a nuclear weapon, and I don't put it past them to use it. The question is then, what would Iran do? I mean, the thinking for America is, well, the nuclear weapons we dropped on Japan, that ended the war. That was it. So Israel would think, okay, we dropped the nuke and that'll end the war. That'll be it. But I don't know if that would be it.
No, I don't. I don't think so. Which is the rationale for the comments I made to you earlier. Remember that Iran consists of a population of over 90 million. The country itself is the size of Western Europe. You have the Turks who are not far behind them. And I think that the use of a nuclear weapon could precipitate the opposite of what the Israelis think it might produce.
Right.
Of course, they may then assume that we will employ our nuclear weapons that we have at sea in support of them. I hope not, because if that were even possible, that would very definitely bring in the Russians and the Iranians. Remember that the Iranians buy roughly 30% of their oil from Iran. It comes through the Persian Gulf.
The Chinese, you mean?
Oh, Chinese, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Russians are very, very concerned about their southern flank because of Central Asia. They want a stable partner in Iran. Iran, if it were to become destabilized or worse yet, divided or fragmented into smaller states, could prove to be an enormous problem for the Russians. They want good relations because they also want Iran to be part of BRICS and this thing we call the One Belt, One Road project. And we've already seen trains arrive from China in Iran carrying various goods. So Iran is a critical member of the what I would call the China, Russia, India, Iranian quadrangle, if you will. All of these states are linked in one way or another. So we're looking at a real potential in the region for Armageddon, which I suppose there are some deranged people that welcome that on the belief of that some has some sort of religious payoff, but for the rest of us, it's insane.
Right.
And we should try and stop it to the extent that we can. But here's the problem: as I was reviewing this man Witkoff, the real estate guru or whatever that is friends with Trump, who runs around with Kushner making deals and pocketing huge quantities of money, at the same time theoretically representing us. And he communicated these demands to Iran. He said, stop enriching uranium, reduce missile stockpiles, reduce approximately 2,000 kilograms of enriched uranium material to 60%, and stop supporting quote unquote regional proxies. That means anybody that Israel doesn't like.
Right.
In return, we'll lift sanctions. Well, that's just it's they can't comply with that. You might as well say the same thing to the Russians. We keep making demands of the Russians, now making demands of Iran that they won't meet because they're sovereign states. And the more that you threaten, the more persuaded they are that they desperately need to build up their military capacity. So it looks like a dead end, and I think we're going to see this war break out probably in 7 to 10 days.
How does it end? I mean, when it comes to regime change, for example, I don't know why they ever thought there's only one way. I mean, we've been doing all of these various tactics to try to get the people inside of countries to turn on their leadership, right? We've sanctioned Cuba for how long, kept them poor for how long, did the same thing to Venezuela. They saw 130,000% increase in inflation. It didn't work. It didn't oust Maduro. There's really only one way for regime change to happen, and that is the military's got to turn on you. And that has historically been the case over and over and over again. When you lose the military, that's when you lose your power. It all comes down to military. So it doesn't look like the Iranian regime, the Iranian military is turning against the Iranian government anytime soon. I mean, maybe, and that would be the only way I could see change actually happening. Otherwise, you just end up in an all-out war, a bloody war, and then I don't know exactly how does that one end. We're not going to go and conquer Iran, are we? I mean, what would be the end game of that war? How would it end?
Israel is in a win or lose everything situation. So if Israel embarks on this war with Iran, the leadership of Iran, the state of Iran, must be destroyed. If it's not destroyed, Israel will be destroyed. I mean, this is the view from Netanyahu and the people that support him. So this is a one-way ticket to Armageddon. So, whatever happens, unless miraculously, as you point out, everything changes, which I don't expect to happen in Iran, this will end up being the destruction of Israel. Now, here we are, and we have pledged our life, treasure, blood, everything to defend Israel to the bitter end. Well, what does that mean? How far are we willing to go?
Right.
Are we willing to engage in a nuclear exchange on behalf of Israel? Well, right now, I would say President Trump would do whatever he's told by Netanyahu and his donors. I just read the other day something about Ron Lauder, this billionaire whose mother or grandmother, I guess, was thrown out of Vienna, Austria, back when the Nazis took over, and she had a perfume business. She came to the United States and made it into $1 billion perfume industry. Supposedly, he is the one who planted the idea of annexing Greenland with the president. So we know who the president listens to. He listens to his billionaire friends and buddies, who all happen to be Zionists. Mm-hmm. So my great concern is that instead of acting like the president of the United States, he'll act like the president of Israel. And that means that he'll rush to the defense of Israel, come hell or high water. I mean, isn't that why Mark Levin calls President Trump the first Jewish president of the United States?
I just don't know how this ends. I mean, that's just the real question. Do you think we're going to end up sending American boots and putting them on the ground in Iran?
No. The country's too big. There are too many people involved. We couldn't control Afghanistan if our lives depended upon it. Mm-hmm. We couldn't control Vietnam, really. Unless you're willing to go in and essentially behave like Genghis Khan and kill 40 or 50,000 people to make your point, which, thank God, we have not been willing to do, mm-hmm. Then I don't see much hope. I mean, in Algeria, where the French had enormous success against an insurgency, they always admitted that as soon as you pulled the troops out of the area, you lost control again. So I don't see any future for that. All I see is the potential for enormous destruction of life and property. And the other thing is that we should not discount the readiness of the Russians or the Chinese to become involved in this.
Yeah.
And I think we do. And I think President Putin has tried very hard to make it clear, don't do this. Don't engage in this war against Iran. And I think we've said, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Listen to General Keane, who probably is one of Trump's senior military advisors for all intents and purposes. And what does he say? Oh, Putin's bluffing. The Ukrainians are winning. Millions of Russians are dying. The economy's broken. Don't worry. That hasn't worked out very well. No. But I think he still is singing the tune that the president is hearing in his ear.
Well, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, thank you so much for being here and giving us your insight into this. It's a scary time for sure. I mean, again, I just don't know how what they think the outcome, what a positive winning outcome is for them. If they think they could go in and somehow control Iran, take down the government, and then what? Are we gonna break it up into pieces? And
remember that we would like to have control of the oil.
Right. Well, of course. Right.
Well, yeah, but that extends the life of the petrodollar. The petrodollar is in a lot of trouble.
Right.
Without petrodollar, you cannot borrow in perpetuity. We want to continue to borrow in perpetuity. So there are a lot of other things going on. That's why the Iranians know exactly what the game is. And we think we're going to have a win in Venezuela. Now we're going to send private contractors down there to protect the oil drilling rigs from being attacked by the locals.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. I mean, you know what private contractors end up doing? They're mercenaries. Mm-hmm. That is a recipe for corruption on a scale that we don't even want to think about. It looks like the 30s, go in and rescue international fruit, send in the Marines or something.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to work very well in Venezuela. I think all of this is going to come apart. In the meantime, just turn on the returns from the various bond markets, listen to the economic analysts, and they all tell you we're headed into bubble bursting territory.
Yeah.
Which bubble do you want to go first? Commercial real estate, private real estate? I mean, we could spend all kinds of time. So one of the things that could get in the way of everything that President Trump wants to do is fiscal reality. That may save us.
Right.
Hell of a thought.
Well, tell us about the national conversation so people can actually hang out with you. Is that what this is? They could actually join you face to face?
Well, we started in Dallas on the 4th of October last year, and we had a good session. It was limited to numbers of people, but the idea was that we wanted every 3 or 4 months to go somewhere new in the country, all across the country, and hold sessions with 400, 500, 600 people. And we would bring in some, subject matter experts, answer questions, but then the audience can directly address any of the subject matter experts, not just me, and say, well, listen, I don't agree with that. This is what I think. So we wanted this forum because we really want to know what Americans think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think most of the time we do.
Mm-hmm.
Or we look at polling data, but you don't get a chance to look at the polling questions. You have no control over who shows up and who says anything. So that's part of it. And it's a good alternative to what John Belushi used to talk about in Animal House. When things get bad, what was John Belushi's solution? Drink heavily. Come to the next event that we are having. We're putting together 3 more cities. We'll have that out soon. And don't drink heavily. Come and show up and express your views. I think we can say that the United States, and that is President Trump, has lost a strategic initiative. If you look at this current extension to a 2-week pause, which is effectively what it will be, that is about as genuine as printing Indian currency in Pakistan. This has nothing to do with peace. It has nothing to do with peace talks. This is all about replenishing our stocks of ammunition, the exotic missiles and rockets and so forth that we expended early on in this campaign. We think that we spent somewhere between 12 and $16 billion in one of the most intense air campaigns in American history in the first 3 or 4 days of the fight with Iran. So I think it's fair to say we're in a lot of trouble. There are certainly recriminations going back and forth. There is no doubt that President Trump has to assume responsibility for the fact that he listened first and foremost to the Israelis and certainly did not pay much attention to people here in the United States that warned him not to do what he's done.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that there were some people who wanted to not have this war and advised as such to the president and he did not listen to them? Because we have not heard something like that, coming out of American reports.
Yes, I think so. Obviously, I've known him for a long time. And, I advised him when I last spoke with him not to do a lot of things, to end the war in Ukraine quickly. While I was working for him in 2020, I said, Iran is a potential strategic partner. We should not look upon them as the enemy and so forth. All of that fell on deaf ears. Remember, he surrounded himself with these New York City billionaires who are all very loyal to the Israeli agenda. And he took a lot of money from these people in order to be elected as president of the United States. So I think when he was elected, he knew that at some point he was going to have to deliver on the promises he made. So I don't think he was really fully apprised of what was going on. Iran, a nation of 93 million, half the size of India, is not going to surrender to anybody. There's no reason why they should. They can absorb a lot of punishment, and they have. And they've demonstrated a new way of war, the 21st century way of war, which is linking space-based intelligence and reconnaissance to numerous strike weapons all over the country, enabling them in the space of a few minutes to concentrate enormous firepower wherever they want to put it. That's why any talk right now about invading Iran is absurd. Any talk about seizing islands in the Persian Gulf is an invitation to disaster.
Yeah.
No one has to sit on those islands to defend them. They can attack them from numerous locations inside Iran.
Okay, go ahead.
Because he was on the point of the missiles, Abhishek. There's a report and different reports coming out. I have one specific report, and because he's a war veteran and he knows a thing or two about these missiles, I have a report here with me, Colonel, and I'm going to read out a few details from this report. It's a UK a research think tank called RUSI, which has put out the report specifically on Israel. The Arrow 2 munitions depletion date projected 27th of March, which is today, which means they will have no more Arrow 2, Arrow 3 missiles. A defensive, the THAAD's projected depletion date 3rd of April 2026 as per the UK think tank. Offensive, the Blue Sparrow air-launched ballistic missile projected depletion date 5th of April 2026. David Sling Stunner projected depletion date 6th of April. Rampage supersonic missile projected depletion date 9th of April. And it goes on and on. what it tells you, and it corresponds, Abhishek and Colonel, with the pictures that are coming out of Tel Aviv. We don't see pictures of the Iron Dome or the interceptions happening anymore. There seems to be a real problem that Israel is facing.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the report. I read it. If anything, they're being generous in that report to all of us. Israel's position is extremely delicate right now. They have virtually no air and missile defense whatsoever. 8 out of every 10 missiles and virtually most so-called drones are penetrating without opposition. So Israel is really in very bad shape. Now, as far as we're concerned, we need to keep in mind that all of the very expensive radars that we had installed across the region have been destroyed, which means we have great difficulty picking up on a lot of these missiles that are shot at us until, frankly, they're almost on top of us. And then finally, remember that we're 7,000 miles away from the United States. So when you're replenishing your stocks, which is what is happening right now in the theater, the replenishment has to come from the United States, thousands of miles. Then it has to be loaded. It has to be loaded onto aircraft, loaded onto ships. All of this takes time, and that's what this pause is all about. And I think then there will be an attempt to launch what they hope will be a war-winning offensive. And I don't think it's going to turn out that way at all. I think this is something for which the Iranians have prepared for over 20 years.
And the Americans did not?
No, of course not. You know, our manufacturing base has shrunken dramatically. We don't have the capacity that we did 40 or 50 years ago to surge production. We're not in the same position as Russia and China right now militarily at all. I think we just grossly miscalculated. We assumed things that were untrue. We assumed that we could bully Iran. We assumed that Iran could be isolated. And I think we completely missed the boat on the economic catastrophe that we're creating globally. You're feeling the impact of this in India. You know that your citizens are lining up in order to fill their gas tanks, and that's no pleasure. You have a similar situation in Japan. This is happening in Europe. Now, the Russians, of course, are making more than $250 million a day more than they previously did. But the Russians and the Chinese both want an end to this because they see supply chains being destroyed. And if we press ahead with this next war-winning offensive, I think that will finish off all the oil infrastructure in the Persian Gulf. Because the Iranians have said very clearly, if you attack our infrastructure, our oil infrastructure, our desalinization plants, we will wipe out everything in the Gulf. This has got to stop. And President Trump has to recognize that whatever advice he got was bad. And he ought to fire everybody working for him right now in the White House.
Maybe there's some realization that's why this attempt to shift the onus on Israel or on Pete Hegseth. But Colonel, one interesting observation you made in your last answer, which was that the Iranian warfare this time has pivoted a lot on space-based intelligence. Now, so far as I know, they do not have satellites. Who's providing them this space-based intelligence?
The Chinese and the Russians. And as a result, anything that moves within 1,000 miles of Iran is immediately identified and picked up. And that information is linked near simultaneously to all of the strike systems on the ground inside Iran. Russia and China have no interest in seeing Iran destroyed by us. They don't have any interest in seeing the society disintegrate. No one in the region wants Iran to become a basket case that the Israelis and Americans can run in, take over the oil fields in their wildest imagination, and essentially divide Iran into smaller bits and pieces, driving millions of people as refugees into Syria, Turkey, Arabia, and ultimately Europe. None of this is desirable. So again, everybody miscalculated because I think Trump listened far, far too much to the Israelis. And the Israelis promised a short, decisive war.
Yeah.
Now they're paying the ultimate price.
You mentioned the Israelis. Look at the situation in Israel, Abhishek. And Colonel, I'm sure you've gone through these reports of the Israeli Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir. He's warned that the IDF could collapse in on itself due to the shortage of soldiers. They're
fatigue that's building.
Fatigue. And the multi-war...
Maybe not as many casualties, but the sheer fatigue of having been in a war. Remember, not for the last 1 month, for the last 2 years, 3 years.
Well, of course, keep something in mind. We don't know the true numbers of casualties for ourselves as well as for the Israelis. No one in Washington or Tel Aviv or Jerusalem is interested in telling anybody the truth right now. And this is not new. We've always rolled casualties in all our wars. But right now, I suspect that we have all sustained far more casualties than we're admitting. As far as the Israelis are concerned, they've depended very heavily on air power for their military strength. They've always had a small army, a small regular force augmented by hundreds of thousands of reservists. This can't work over time. They're running out of steam, not just people, but they're exhausted. They have had lots of losses. But I think the Israelis bet heavily that we would be their infantry, as well as their artillery and their air power. That hasn't worked out well.
Yeah. And domestically, both Trump and Netanyahu are now facing this unique situation where there is massive opposition. Republicans themselves questioning Donald Trump. Saw a few of those comments come in. People are unhappy. In Israel, the opposition is questioning Netanyahu. By the way, where is Netanyahu? Nobody knows. I saw a report today, Abhishek, Colonel, that mentioned that maybe his flight was spotted in Berlin. He's been in Berlin for the last 2 weeks. I don't know where he is, but it appears extremely shady at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. I have no idea where he is. I would be careful, though, of the American situation. Go back to President Trump's State of the Union address, and when he talked about stopping Iran from having a nuclear weapon and taking whatever action was required, he got a standing ovation from virtually everybody in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, because they've all effectively been bought by the Israel lobby. And the billionaires that back the Israel lobby have bought up these candidates. And as a result, I have almost no sympathy whatsoever for Congress. They're as culpable in all of this nonsense as is the president. But the president, if he wants to get out of this mess, should not continue to do what doesn't work. Remember the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again in the expectation that you're going to get a different result. This next war-winning assault is not going to win the war. What he ought to do at this point is fire the people around him, step forward and say, look, I was wrong. This was a mistake. I'm disengaging. If he were willing to do that, then large numbers of people in the world, I think, leaders would come and assist him to mediate an end to this tragedy. That's one of the reasons that I mentioned Prime Minister Modi previously. But there are others that could come in as well, people that all sides could trust. That's what we desperately need. We don't need an extension of this war.
Yes. A couple of last questions, last two, and I'll take one, Abhishek, and you can take one on Karg Island. I wanted to ask Colonel Macgregor on, and you can take that, and I'll take the one on Pakistan, because you've spoken about Pakistan. You know, this joke of a country called Pakistan wants to mediate on the war. What's happening on that front? What are you hearing? Are they really mediating? Is there a mediation at all?
Know, I have my doubts. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I don't think President Trump would turn away anybody who offered help. But whether or not that means anything, I mean, he says we're holding talks. What I've seen in the past is that the CIA and Mossad will pick people out of a government, people at levels below the senior leadership, and start conversing with them in the hopes that they can be co-opted or bribed. And ultimately, that'll help us win whatever we want to win. That's not going to work with Iran. The Mossad was already in there and says, bought people up.
They're acting as a courier.
When he says he's talking to someone in Iran, who is he talking to?
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point. None of us really knows. And that's why I think the intelligence agencies are talking to generals or colonels or somebody somewhere in the hopes that this is going to be a breakthrough. I think it's just nonsense. I think you can't believe much of what's coming out of Washington right now. Everyone is desperate, even though we project this air of confidence. The truth is, behind the scenes, the president is quite desperate. He recognizes at this stage that he was lied to, and he made some bad calls. Well, the only way to get out of it is to admit that and disengage and ask for help from others. That's the only way. But at the moment, the plan is to do what I said before, be insane, double down on what has failed in the past and hope that it works. It's not going to happen. I don't care how many little islands they try to seize in the Persian Gulf. You put people on an island that's perhaps 14 or 15 square kilometers and a few intermediate range ballistic missiles or tactical ballistic missiles and drones, and everybody on the island is dead. This is not 1944. This is not 1984. This is 26. Warfare is different. It's changed.
Well, it is 1984 in the sense that war is peace. But Colonel Macgregor, my question is, if the weaponry is depleted, as you suggest, if the leadership is so clueless as to where to take this next, how then are you saying that the United States is going to double down? There are no weapons, there is no direction. How do you double down? You can't.
Well, that's why you have a break right now. This is why you've got this phony pause. It's not for peace talks. It's to replenish the stocks. So I think they're bringing in whatever we still have in the United States, sitting on the shelves, and bringing it out to the theater. That's what's happening to the Navy and the Air Force. And at the same time, whenever air campaigns fail historically, we then turn to the use of ground forces. That's what happened to us in Vietnam with Rolling Thunder. I went through this during the Kosovo air campaign. It lasted 78 days. And by 60 days into the campaign, it was obvious it wasn't working. And there were tremendous efforts to try and press President Clinton to commit ground forces. Ultimately, he refused to, and instead we managed to bribe the Russians to pull the plug on Milosevic in Serbia and end the campaign. This is a dumb idea. Anytime you go into any fight and you take the approach that you're going to use air power only because you don't want casualties, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Colonel Macgregor, you just gave, half a dozen of the list of 83 attempts or successes that the United States has had on regime change, this time perhaps failing, But I think we are not yet over with the conversation. We'll continue to have that. Thank you so much for